What's up? What's happening? Welcome in. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Spend a lot of this first hour on the show talking about the women's championship game yesterday. What an epic it was. I would also assume at some point within the next couple of hours we'll get the TV number too, expecting that to be over 20 million viewers for that 3 o'clock afternoon window on ABC. We were treated to a tremendous game. We will also preview the men's game tonight coming up at 5 o'clock with our friend Justin Williams of The Athletic. He joined us last week on the show. He was great, so we invited him back to preview the final and talk about the bombshell that John Calipari is leaving Kentucky for Arkansas. So a lot of college hoops today. We'll do a little Commanders draft later on in the show. But, Ant, before we do all that, how are you feeling after the wedding weekend?
I spent all of yesterday trying to recover. I spent, part of this morning also trying to recover. I think I'm okay. That
you sound good.
Okay.
You definitely had me nervous earlier today when you were texting me, and you were like, I don't know, my voice is a little raspy. And I'm like, do you sound hungover? Do you feel hungover? Both. And you're like, I think I just sound, but I feel good.
Yeah. This morning my voice was very raspy. I was on the phone with somebody that's going to do my taxes, and I was hearing myself. I'm like, yo, this is unacceptable.
Not good.
So yeah, I drank some tea. I've been drinking a lot of water. Got some food in me. So I think the road to recovery is going good.
Excellent. All right. Love that for you.
Yes.
So without further ado, now that we know that Ant has survived what was, you told me, a phenomenal wedding weekend. Congrats to Z on that. We proceed with the proceedings. So Iowa got off to a start last night that was as good as they could have dreamed of. Unfortunately for them, the rule of basketball in playoff-style competition, or in this case, championship college-style competition, came to be true, which is eventually in every basketball championship matchup, there will be an adjustment that the other team, or that team one makes that team two can't adjust to. And that ultimately is kind of what happened yesterday. Now, these two teams were fairly evenly matched in that Clark was able to overcome so much of what South Carolina has from a depth standpoint. But there's just a couple of things that they couldn't deal with. And that is part of it was the sheer numbers that, yes, Caitlin started on fire. 18 points into the first quarter, the most ever for a player in a quarter in an NCAA final. Nuts. She's hitting threes. She had a 30-footer. And you're just like, oh, God, she's about to do it again. And that's the thing that I think has made Caitlin Clark so remarkable, specifically in her senior year, is she has seemingly answered the bell at every major inflection point of the season. She has come through in the biggest moments. And even yesterday, with what we'll talk about in terms of her quote-unquote cooling off, she still finished the game with 30 points, 8 rebounds, and 5 assists. And that assist number would be higher if some of her teammates had made some pretty makeable layups. But the size, the athleticism, and the just sheer numbers of South Carolina ultimately meant that the indestructible force or the immovable object didn't move against what we thought was an indestructible force in Clark. And I think you brought this up when we were talking about the game pre-show, so I will give you the credit here. The fact that South Carolina, at this stage in the season, in the final game, when they had played all these games and the minutes had accumulated and they started their season in Paris and the whole deal, still had body after body to throw at Clark and play the kind of defense that West Virginia and LSU tried but couldn't because they didn't have the athletes to do it, both in the caliber and the quantity and quality, is exactly why Dawn Staley's team was the best team in the country. The ability to just say, all right, fine, you're torching her, try this one. Okay, you figured her out. All right, who's next? And Raven Johnson, who famously or infamously, depending on how you want to look at it, was the player that Caitlin Clark gave the what for, gave the whatever, shoot it, kid, I don't care, last year in the tournament, ultimately, ironically, inverted that equation. She went from Caitlin Clark doesn't care about being close to you to Raven Johnson is all up in Caitlin Clark's business. and the steal at the end of the half, and just the generally great defense that Johnson was able to play and just devote that much energy to is the separator that holds Clark in enough check that South Carolina, along with some tremendous shooting on their own side of the ball, which is the other big difference between South Carolina this year and South Carolina last year, is why they have Dawn Staley's third national title.
Craig, we definitely were in for a treat yesterday. I think everything you talked about on the front of, what South Carolina was able to do against Caitlin Clark definitely was, instrumental in slowing her down those last three quarters. But I think Iowa, had they been able to just capitalize on a couple of, layups or, when layups, threes, like they had some really good looks at threes.
Late in the game, they get that huge steal where it looks like they're about to tie it up, and Sydney Afalter, she just dribble out to safety. And instead she tries, and Afalter made so many big plays. They're not in that space in the situation. Even within the game, they're not in that moment without Sydney Afalter's contributions. But a huge, huge mistake to try to take on what ultimately wound up, she couldn't see behind her, was three South Carolina defenders, and they steal the ball right back, and that was kind of the moment where the game ended for all intents and purposes.
Yeah, and I think those are the moments, against a team like South Carolina that's so deep. They go 11 deep.
Yeah.
Not 10, 11.
Yeah.
So
the regular tightened rotation is 9.
Exactly. So I just feel as though in a game like that, you have to not necessarily be perfect, but almost play a perfect game. And you got off to the start that you wanted. You started to miss some shots. They definitely started to capitalize on some shots. They also capitalized on turnovers. But that is their bread and butter. That's what that's gotten them to this point. But down the stretch of the games, when those moments matter, you got to be able to execute. And I think this South Carolina, they were able to just make one extra play after another, and ultimately end up getting the job done.
Yeah, I think that there's a couple. I think if you're Iowa today, you are kicking yourself because there's a couple of key mistakes that you made that you were in control of.
Mm-hmm.
I think objectively, looking at this, this is a tremendous success of a season for Iowa. Someone tweeted me yesterday. It's like Cardoso and Clark were playing pickup, but Cardoso got the first 8 picks. And I don't know whether it's 8 because as a college, as pro prospects, sure. But as college players, Kate Martin and Gabby Marshall, I'm so happy they got their shine over the course of this run, kind of being in the bask of the glow of Caitlin Clark, because they're tremendous college basketball players. Martin, I think, could be a pro. If I'm a WNBA team and I just need a glue player, Kate Martin's someone I want on the end of my bench. Someone who I'm just you know what? Screw it. Let's see what Kate can do today. She's going to make the right play. She's going to make my practices better. I would pay Kate Martin to be on my team. Knowing that she's never probably a WNBA starter, but you need people who are going to be stars in their roles. And for this Iowa team, Martin was tremendous. She also had a couple of whoopsies yesterday. I also thought there were a couple of plays, where maybe she does the right thing and she gets unlucky where she gets stripped or there seemed to be, she could not buy a foul call yesterday. I thought there was a couple of missed calls both ways. So I'm not by any means playing the if it wasn't for the refs, Iowa would have won. There was a couple of calls both ways where you're just wait, what did you guys see there? There was a one travel call in South Carolina where it should have been a foul, but even if you don't call the foul, the pivot foot never moved.
Mm-hmm.
And you're just what?
On Cardoso, yep.
Yeah, on Cardoso. And then there was, Martin, it just seemed like she and Clark both like got fouled on shots multiple times, and you're like, where's the call on that? And it happened the other way as well. So just a kind of a wacky, standardly wacky college officiating game. But like the Afalter play, Stolke, I think obviously has that big missed layup where I think she converts so many of those that people underestimate how hard that is when you're running full speed and Clark just dots you with a dime and you have to catch and finish in one motion and try to slow yourself down enough that you don't just clang the ball off the backboard because you're running at literally full speed. The touch that requires, the athleticism that requires, and Stolke does it so well all year long, but like in the biggest spot, she bonks a layup. I think if you're Lisa Bluter, like I'm looking at my rotations going, why did I Madison O'Grady, I think is her name, O'Grady, the backup big. She was really good for them all year. That was not her game yesterday. Like, she took advantage of size and kind of strength all year. You can't do that to Cardoso, and Cardoso ate her lunch every time she was in. And by the end of the night, like, Stolke's only played 27 of the 40 minutes, and she only had 2 fouls. So, like, what are we doing there? So I think that there's things if you're Iowa as a competitor, and my apologies, it's Addison O'Grady, Addie, not Maddie. Addison O'Grady was the backup big who plays 13 minutes, and those were not quality 13 minutes. It wasn't her game. So as a coaching staff, I think you have to go, like, what are we doing here? And in that way, I think if you're Iowa as a competitor, you're kicking yourself. As an objective observer, that's what happens against South Carolina. They're just better because that's what Dawn Staley has built. And what's crazy is, Ant, they are 109-3 in the last 2 years, or last 3 years. 109-3. Everybody but Cardoso is probably coming back, unless they have players leaving the transfer portal. And undoubtedly, Dawn's probably got the best freshman class in the country coming because that's what she does. They are, like, this might not even be the middle of the run. This might be the beginning. Like, and they just won the title. This was supposed to be the down year. And this is what Dawn has built. It's crazy.
Yeah, it's actually crazy because, again, they lost all 5 of their starters from last year.
5 pros, 5 WNBA pros. Every single one of them was drafted.
Yep.
That doesn't happen in this sport.
And then you come into this tournament and you're relying on, Malaysia Wiley to come in and spark the offense. Also, Tessa Johnson came in and gave them a spark. And these are freshmen. So it's scary. I think it compares to, when Gino, during the 2000s, I guess, when he just had multiple runs where his teams were winning 100 games, losing like 4 games over the span of 3-4 years. And it's just like, good gracious, like, will the bleeding ever stop? And I think you might be onto something. Like, this could possibly still be the beginning because, again, these impact players, they're freshmen. Sanaya Fagan, a freshman. So the sky's the limit for them right now.
It's crazy. I mean, actually, we watched the new Sue Bird doc last night after the game, and we were reminded, like, Sue is 2 years older than Diana Taurasi, and so Sue and company win a national title during Sue's sophomore year, and then DT comes into a team that had won a title. And they actually lost that next year and then won again Sue's senior year, and then DT wins another one, I believe, after Sue graduates. But that kind of run is what we're talking about when Gino goes Maya Moore into Brianna Stewart in the early or in the 2010s. Like, that's kind of what we're talking about here potentially with South Carolina. I do wonder, like, obviously Aaliyah Boston's a star, not just as a broadcaster, but it was so funny, the memes yesterday, because it's like, this is how happy you look when your team wins the Natty and Caitlin Clark becomes your teammate next week, because that's what Aaliyah Boston's reality is right now. But I do wonder who the next star is, and Wiley certainly is candidate A right now. But it's going to be a lot of fun to watch this program continue to develop over the next couple of years. Like, if Rebecca Lobo was Asia Wilson, if you will, in the Connecticut South Carolina analogy, who are the next couple of players that come through? It's going to be a lot of fun. We'll continue to break down the game next, and then we have a question for you coming up at 4:30. We'll go to the phones at 301-230-0980. Obviously, I'm wearing the shirt. Everyone watches women's sports, right? Like, we've seen the ratings. The biggest basketball game in ESPN's history is the Friday night game between UConn and Iowa. So now what? If you're one of the people that was watching, will you continue to watch? We'll ask that question, and how much really is the question. We'll ask that at 4:30, 301-230-0980. More talk about the game, and we'll touch on that Friday night game, UConn, as well, next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show, Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up in just a few minutes, your phone calls on whether you're hooked for good or were you on the hook for the moment as we await the number for the women's national title game yesterday on ABC, expecting it to be over 20 million viewers. ESPN's coverage of UConn and Iowa on Friday night peaked at 17, the average 14, which made it, Anthony, the most watched non-football broadcast in ESPN's history.
Good gracious.
Or sorry, I believe it's the second most. Either way, like crazy big number. The interest clearly there. And I'm surprised by that number, not because, like, I've been talking about this stuff longer than most, right? Like, I'm fighting all the time to talk about it more because it interests me and I, like, genuinely follow it and I like talking about stuff that I know about. But I was surprised at that number, surely because it's a Friday night at 9 p.m. Like, that's not exactly primetime television viewers ratings bonanza. The ABC 3 p.m., yeah, like go look at what the NFC and AFC championship numbers do in that window. When people want to plop down on a Sunday at 3 p.m., that's a good time to get something on television. It actually often performs better than some of the Sunday night stuff. So a lot of people were like, oh, prime time is where this game should be. Their TV executives are not stupid. That 3 p.m. window, I don't know how it compares to Sunday prime time, but like that's a big one. And it will not surprise me if whatever number that game gets blows tonight's game, Monday night, 9:20 tip. I don't know what the hell they're doing on the men's side. I realize that you got to wait for the West Coast. Like you don't want to start the game at 7 p.m. because that's a 4 p.m. Pacific tip, and that feels unfair to the West Coast. But still, 9:20. What are we doing? But I think that based off the 9:20 Monday night tip time and a game that's on TBS, not CBS, so not network on cable, I do think that tonight there's a really good chance that the number, even with UConn Purdue, great matchup, doesn't hit what the game yesterday did. But I think that Friday night game is actually interesting to talk about, Ant, because it gets into everybody's favorite topic, which is it ends on a controversial call. Thanks to the referees calling that moving screen on Aaliyah Edwards. And Ant, I have an unpopular opinion.
You're going to say it should have been called, it was an illegal screen.
Incorrect.
Oh, okay.
I actually intentionally didn't tweet this take out because it's too nuanced for Twitter and online discussion. It is simply that people put way too much weight in that single call. So, one, it was correctly called by the letter of the law as an illegal screen. And some of the angles that ESPN showed weren't exactly favorable to that. But in order to be a legal screen by the definition, by the letter of the law, you have to be basically completely stationary, and you have to be inside your body. Aaliyah Edwards takes the screen with her elbows outside, slightly outside of her body, and a wider base. Her feet are outside of her hips. That is illegal. She was also moving. She kind of pushes into Gabby Marshall. Marshall deserves a ton of credit for playing it as well as you can defensively, for fighting over, which kind of draws the foul. But I hate the call because it was a physical game where they let a lot of stuff go, and you judge as a player at any level. You judge what you can get away with by how the refs are calling it. So if they're calling it super tight and they're calling everything the whole night like that, and they make that call, I'm like, you want to know what? That's on Aaliyah Edwards. It's on UConn. Like, you got to be smarter because they've called it tight all game. They didn't. I literally had tweeted earlier and turned to Rachel and been like, this is a bloodbath. They are letting everything go. Mm-hmm. So I hate the inconsistency. But, one, Marshall was playing really good defense, and there was no guarantee that it's not like they wiped a basket off the board. They wiped a shot attempt off the board. And then that still left them down. They were down one.
Yep.
Clark makes one, misses one, and they give up a free throw rebound. If I'm Gino, I walk in that locker room and I'm like, hey, I know you guys don't want to hear this because the season's over and it's not about this game, but like, realistically, I don't want to hear a single person complaining about the refs when you give up a free throw rebound. That's on us. We put ourselves in that situation because we had time, we had a way to overcome that call. If we grab that rebound, call timeout, we can go down, we hit a 3, and we got a game on Sunday. But people don't want to do that. They just want to blame the refs. And so, well, yes, I disagree vehemently with the call, especially given the situation and how that game played out. To put it all on that call and just absolve UConn of any fault or blame in their own loss is oversimplifying it, and I hate when people do that.
To be honest, Craig, I agree with you on that principle that, it can't just, we can't just look at one play in the game. It's how many minutes do they play?
40.
40-minute game. Like, you're not just going to rest the entire game on that one play. But as you already mentioned, if you're going to play and allow the women to go out there and play physical, it's just making that call. I just couldn't.
I hate the call.
It's
a terrible call.
Was so bad, and I think that's why everybody's just held, because what if that call doesn't get made? Then what? We don't really know, but also I think Paige Bueckers was in a bad situation.
And I think that's the thing, right? Is we're robbed of the moment.
Yeah.
We're robbed of Bueckers putting up something crazy. Maybe it goes in, and then maybe Iowa calls timeout, and then we get a Clark game winner that goes down in history on the other end.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's Bueckers, whatever. Like, we get robbed of the moment, and that's a fair thing. That's a fair thing to say. We are robbed of a moment because of the officials. But that is, and by the way, the officiating in college basketball, and specifically in women's college basketball, and I will also say, for those of you that are getting ready to embark on a journey into being a fan of the WNBA, it's just as bad, and it's just as bad because it's many of the same officials. It's awful. And frankly, I think there's a bit of good that comes from it being in the spotlight, because eventually enough attention causes change. But it didn't cost UConn the game. It cost UConn a chance at the game, and they had other chances even after a call that happened with 2.8 seconds on the clock, and they did not take advantage of those chances. So this then begs the question, with all of this, South Carolina now the third national championship of their program history, all three, of course, coming since 2017 in the Dawn Staley era. The question we have for you on the phones, 301-230-0980. We know that people watched this year. Will you continue to watch, and how much? What is your interest level in the women's college game moving forward? That answer from you on the phones at 301-230-0980 next on The Hoffman Show. Benefits Show, live on the Team 980 and the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. 5 o'clock, we talked to Justin Williams from The Athletic on the men's championship game tonight. Coverage starts 6:30 here on the Team 980, courtesy of Westwood One. Plus, why did John Calipari leave Kentucky for Arkansas? It seems crazy on its face. Justin helps us piece together the pieces coming up at 5 p.m. Right now, though, a question for you. 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301-230-0980, where we ask you this simple query. We know that people are watching women's sports in record numbers, and specifically this season, watch women's college basketball in record numbers. 14 million on Friday night on ESPN for UConn, Iowa is the biggest game that they've ever had, basketball, period. The biggest, or second biggest, I believe, non-football event they've ever had on the network. We've seen what Dawn Staley has built in South Carolina, where they sell out their arena every single night. You see Iowa season start this year at Kinnick Stadium, their football stadium, where 55,000 came to watch Caitlin Clark and company. Even outside of basketball, this weekend, the She Believes Cup in Atlanta, U.S. Soccer versus Japan, they had 50,000. It was the largest crowd ever for a friendly for the U.S. women's national team. We know women's sports are growing, but specific to college basketball, to women's college basketball, there is unquestionably a Caitlin Clark element. She is a star of stars. She is a unique talent that plays the game in a way that is not just incredibly productive, as she just continued to smash every record in her sight, and, by the way, do it while leading her team to heights that they had never been before. So it wins, it's productive, and it's entertaining as hell. Who doesn't love logo threes? Who doesn't love the kinds of passes that she makes? The way she plays the game is an attractive style of basketball, up-tempo, and it's worked from I don't call it a PR, but it's worked from an aesthetic standpoint throughout the history of the game. Think of some of the most popular teams that we've ever seen. The Showtime Lakers certainly come to mind. The current version, or the recent iterations, I should say, of the Warriors, led by these flashy passing point guards. And while Steph Curry and Magic Johnson stylistically are extremely different, that ability to push pace and make plays that Clark also has made her must-see TV. And I can guarantee you that while I did carve time out of my day on a random Wednesday night in the middle of the year to watch Iowa on the Big Ten Network, I won't do that next year. There is a ton of star power behind her in college basketball on the women's side of things. Kiki Rice, the D.C. native who is out at UCLA, star. Juju Watkins could very well 3 years from now be challenging a lot of Clark's scoring records. She's that good. She's just phenomenal. And showed it as a freshman. Obviously, Paige Beckers at UConn was actually the number one player in Clark's recruiting class. And if not for her injuries, we might be talking even more than we already did about Clark and Beckers. There are still Flau'jae Johnson at LSU. Pick your player at South Carolina outside of Camila Cardozo, who should be a top 5 pick in next Monday's WNBA draft. The star power is undeniably still in the sport, but none of them are Clark. And part of that is the novelty of Clark being the first one to break through, or the first one in a while to break through in this way. And there are tremendously deep conversations to get into about why Clark did that beyond the basketball. And I don't really want to get into all of those right now. But really the question I have at 301-230-0980 is, will you continue to watch? Because I do think these types of things, having been an observer and coverer of women's sports since my career started, these things, it's not even going in waves. It tends to be a stock market style of growth. There is a peak that is sparked by a singular event or series of events or players or teams, such as the 2019 Women's World Cup team saw a massive uptick in the growth of women's soccer popularity in this country. And as a result, what happens is some of the forces that hold the sports back then remove themselves. Biggest one being investment. All of a sudden, the demand is there. People are filling stadiums and desiring better TV coverage and all of the things. And sponsors are like, well, shoot, if there's people, then there's money to be made. And all of a sudden there's investment in the sports. And even though some fans will treat it as a fleeting moment in time, others will stick around for the long haul. And that's really the question I would like to answer is like, how many of y'all are around for the long haul? How many of you are saying, I see what Caitlin Clark did, and while I did that, while that was the door in for me, that let me watch Paige Beckers, that let me watch Juju Watkins, that let me watch a style, maybe even it's a style of basketball that is more appealing. You watch a lot of the women's games are higher scoring and played in a much more, to me, like if you love the game, purest basketball way. And that's not to say like, oh, they're not dunking, like that's not even like coded language. Just like the fun, like a lot of the men's college basketball circuit is very AAU style isolation, or just like terrible college offenses. And I feel like there's been more innovation on the women's side of the game, like schematically. And so maybe that's the appeal to you. It could be any of these things. It could be none of these things. But how many folks are around for the long haul? Because I think what is changing, obviously, is the investment, and that is going to matter. There is unquestionably an investment element to this that is leading to the popularity. You have to show people the thing so that they can like it. And ESPN has taken it seriously. And they've had various levels of serious over the years. But, I mean, I think one of the breakout stars of this NCAA tournament outside of Clark, who had already broken out, and some of the other players that all of a sudden people got to see more of, is Elle Duncan and Shanae Ogwumike and Andrea Carter, who suddenly people are recognizing might be the best studio show in America for any sport. What those three did, and you add in Carolyn Peck and Aaliyah Boston for the Final Four, but those three throughout the tournament, like studio television around sporting events doesn't get better than that. And that involves investment, not just in the right talent, but in producers and the types of behind-the-scenes executives to make a show like that pop in that way. You can't replace the talent. You can't replace the fact that the chemistry between those three and Shanae and Andrea are just stars. Elle is the perfect host for it. Like, all of that stuff matters, but it starts with giving them a chance to do it. Doing 2 minutes with the broadcast crew for a 7:02 tip and starting the telecast at 7 versus starting it at 6:30 and giving them a half-hour pregame are very, very different levels of investment. And it allows, through that, to kind of foster the environment that sports grow in, where we have debates, where we get to know the players that are invested in their storylines and all of these things that we've seen fluctuate in other sports. To take it away from, the men, women, whatever, like, there's a reason the NHL, after years of declining ratings and declining interest, was like, we got to get back to ESPN. Because as much as ESPN isn't what it was in the 90s and early 2000s, when SportsCenter was king and, the media environment was very different, ESPN's still the kingmaker. ESPN is still, to use their words, the worldwide leader in sports. And I think women's college basketball's place on that network matters a lot. It's why I think the National Women's Soccer League was brilliantly smart to make sure that ESPN ABC was a part of their package. It's why the NHL went back. It's why MLB won't leave. It's why, the NFL, even though ESPN is the lowest in terms of rights holders, in terms of the number of games, I guess they're right there now with Amazon, where it's you get to one game a week, and then sometimes the ESPN has doubleheaders, and then they're going to have the playoff game. ESPN and the NFL have had a great relationship because ESPN gets all the rights. You'll notice if you watch SportsCenter for the NCAA tournament for the men, there's very limited highlights. The sharing isn't there. The relationship, or like the Olympics, right? ESPN will only pay for certain stuff, and they have for years been like, we want to be able to show as much NFL content as humanly possible. There's no rules, no restrictions, basically, on what they can do, and that has helped in the growth of the sport. And so there's ultimately, like, those are a lot of the factors to me, but there is still an amount of, like, icing and cake here. And if Clark's the icing, like, we got a mountain of icing. How much is getting chopped off? So 301-230-0980 is the phone number. 301 230-0980. We can take your calls on that question. How much will you still watch moving forward into next year? Next on The Hoffman Show. It's the Hoffman Show. We are always live on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. There's so much going on in front of me right now. And one, I look down across the hall. I guess Grant and Danny are in a break right now because they're both in the control room with Darius. But Russell's also in there. Do the Caps play tonight that he's going to a game? Like what's our guy still doing here? Is he bored? Is he sitting out traffic?
That's usually what he does. He usually hangs out and heads to a game. So maybe.
And if he's going to the Caps tonight, that'd be one thing. But the Caps don't play tonight. I don't know. He's now coming down this way. I don't know. You and I are similar. When the show's over, we're out here as soon as we can.
Yeah.
Chances that you catch me here 50 minutes after my show ends are between slim and none, and they're a lot closer to none.
Even when I was working earlier and I had 9 to 12, I was out of here 15-minute stops.
Yeah. He did just grab his bag. Maybe he knows that we're talking about him. Is he going to turn the corners? Or he can go back into the... Nope, he turned the corner. But I don't understand why you leave the building that way. Why wouldn't you just go this way?
It's a great question.
International man of mystery, that Chris Russell.
Yes.
That was one thing that was happening in front of me. Two, I'm looking up at the television screen. And do you know, Ant, the last time the Rams made a first-round pick, apparently?
I know the saying, and I'm not going to use it because it isn't FCC friendly. But if I had to guess, 2024 right now, maybe like 2018 when I graduated, 2017.
You're pretty close. It's 2016. This is just on NFL Live, which, by the way, because you weren't here on Friday. You missed one of the announcements. Who's the lady on your television right now?
That's Mina Kimes.
Yeah, you know what she's doing on Wednesday?
She's joining you and Logan.
That is correct. Mina Kimes on Take Command Wednesday. That'll be out Thursday. We might air a little bit of it Wednesday on this show. Probably air it on Thursday. But we're excited to have Mina on the show. We got another big one that we're almost done booking for early next week. So it's going to be this blitz towards the draft. Like, Take Command is going to be the best draft coverage that you can find because, one, we're going to have like the best guests that you can possibly have, and two, it'll be geared towards the Commanders, so you can like listen to all your national shows or you can get Commanders coverage. Although I will say with Mina, we're going to do a little bit more of a national type of thing because we're going to be looking at the war room. Like, we're basically going to do a mock draft. We're going to steal the idea that she does on her podcast and flip it back on her, where we do a war room mock draft, which is also a style of mock draft that we're going to do on this show at some point soon. But they were flashing up the Rams have not had a first-round pick since 2016. Their last first-round pick, Ant, do you know who it was?
Last first-round pick? No.
Jared Goff.
Dang.
The last time the LA Rams picked in the first round, it was Jared Goff. The second to last pick that they had, 2015, was Todd Gurley. And then before that was Aaron Donald, and they were still in St. Louis.
Wow. That's also 3 great draft picks, by the way.
Yeah, it's pretty good.
Yeah.
They did also get Greg Robinson in that draft, 2014. The Donald pick went a little bit better.
Yeah. Aaron Donald retired this weekend. Was that this weekend?
No, it was last weekend.
Oh. Weekends, yeah.
Oh, it was like 2 weeks ago, actually. It was when I was in South Carolina last. Because I was listening. I remember I was on my long run, jogging down the Swamp Rabbit Trail, listening to Jason Kelce tell horror stories of what it was like to guard him. And he basically said there was no other defensive lineman in the league that they automatically doubled every single snap. And there was one game the last time they played that Kelce missed that Donald had subbed back in. He had subbed out and subbed in and subbed out and subbed in, and he missed that he subbed back in. And so the automatic line call, like the protection, was slide to 99 no matter what. And Landon Dickerson's expecting help, and Donald gets through, or all of a sudden he's one-on-one with Aaron Donald, and after the play, he's like, hey, Kels, we not slide to 99 anymore? And he's like, I didn't realize he was in. My bad.
That's funny.
My bad. But the Eagles, I think, are the only team that Donald never had a sack against.
Wow.
Or I don't know whether they're the only one, because, I mean, you only play certain teams so often, but he never had a sack against the Eagles. And Kelsey was like, that's ridiculous that people are like, oh, the Eagles it shows how great their O-line is. No, we literally double-teamed him or triple-teamed him every single snap.
I mean, the Seahawks quadruple teamed him, and they didn't get a sack on that play. I don't know if you're the defensive line coach, if you're in the film room talking about guys.
Hey, guys, others. We use that term in basketball. The others got to come through. At that point, if you got, even if it's 2-on-1 defensive lineman to one offensive lineman, you got a 3 down front. You got 4 linemen on one Aaron Donald. Someone else has got to get to the quarterback.
Yeah, somebody.
Yeah. So I guess just no one's calling today, because sometimes we have caller segments, Ant, where I'm like, this might hit, this might not.
Yeah.
I typically know when I think something is going to really hit, and I don't miss on that often. Yeah. I'm stunned no one has called in on this topic.
Yeah, because everybody was locked in. Everybody was watching.
Everybody was watching, but not as much on the calling. The YouTube chat had a couple of people locked in, basically saying they were going to stay kind of where they were. Some people saying, like, I watched, and I'm going to continue watching. Other folks saying I never watched because I like watching other stuff, and I didn't start watching because of Caitlin Clark, so I'm not going to start watching now. And that was kind of and then because it's a YouTube chat, people got sidetracked into arguing about wrestling,
which was also very much elite.
In what way? The script writing is elite.
Yes, the action,
yeah,
everything.
If it's entertain, I mean, if you're looking for entertainment, go for it. If you think it's pure competition, like, okay. But I also look, it's not for me. I'm not gonna yuck other people's yums. If you like wrestling, wrestle away.
Wrestling. Nah, WrestleMania this past weekend. I didn't even get to watch much of it. I was, out and about moving around.
You were in the city where it was.
I was. I was not that far away because it was in Philly.
Yeah.
I wasn't that far away. So, yeah, that was crazy.
Yeah. Is there anything, I don't want to I feel weird because if you went to just a friend, a regular friend's wedding, I clearly ask you about how it went, but because your friend is an NFL player, I don't want to put his business out.
Yeah.
But how was the wedding?
The wedding, that was.
I'm not trying to do a whole segment on it. I'm asking you as your friend / your colleague, realizing that there are limitations we're gonna put on it because your friend is a professional athlete.
It was very well organized, very well done. I love the all black aesthetic that they wanted. It was an all black affair essentially. They have everybody dress up in black and white. Well, all black.
Oh, black. The bride gets to wear white.
Yeah, she got to wear white.
And then Z had the white coat. Yeah.
Yeah, but it was.
The rest of y'all look like you were extras in Men in Black.
Yes.
Which was kind of the goal.
Yes.
You just really went for it with the sunglasses and the style.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Do you know who Agent Bubbles is from Lilo and Stitch?
No.
One of the guys. So one of the groomsmen, he actually looked like Agent Bubbles. It was actually very funny.
That's really funny.
Yeah,
I just laughed at the picture you sent me where one of the dudes looked like Tress Way.
Oh, yeah,
I was like, does he know Tress Way? No, that's not Tress. That's not Tress. I don't know who that was.
Yeah, that was my guy, Levi.
Levi, only white dude in the photo, looked like Tress Way.
He really did, though.
Hilarious. Anyway, apropos of none of that, when we get back, we're going to talk to Justin Williams about college basketball, Calipari to Arkansas, and a full preview. What does Purdue need to do to knock off mighty UConn tonight? Justin Williams, our buddy from The Athletic, joins us next on The Hoffman Show. Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app and streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. Coming up in about 30 minutes, we might have a guest talking about the big stories of the day. Of course, both college championship games. Justin Williams, by the way, from The Athletic, standing by. He will be with us in just 1 minute to talk about the men's game tonight. But depending on if we can work out the details, if not, that guest is likely going to join us tomorrow, so I don't ruin who it is just in case. But we will talk Commanders, talk draft, and some interesting feedback I'm getting on a segment we did on Friday specific to Jaden Daniels. And I just want to try to explain something, which always is and the best way to go about a take. It's kind of like if you're explaining a joke, it's not that funny. If you're explaining a take, I don't know if it's that good, but this is radio. It's draft time. I'd rather just continue the dialogue and have people understand kind of what I'm saying versus just clearly something's not connecting. So I'm going to try to explain it a different way. We'll get to that, Commanders, later in the show. Right now, though, it is time for Not My Beat.
Today's top story from the perspective of someone who's there.
You are looking live.
This just in, Not My Beat.
Joining us now from The Athletic, we welcome back to the show Justin Williams, college basketball writer. Justin, what's up, man? How are you? Welcome back to the show.
I'm good. I appreciate you guys having me back.
Yeah, absolutely. So obviously in the spotlight tonight, UConn, Purdue, and we'll talk about that first. And then I do want to touch on the John Calipari to Arkansas story, a seismic shift in college basketball for sure. But this is the battle that kind of everyone's been waiting for. It is, it feels like for the second straight night, like unstoppable force, immovable object kind of thing. Obviously Caitlin Clark, the unstoppable force, South Carolina, the immovable object. I think it's probably a little up for debate which one is which in the men's side of the bracket. But is there anything when you look at this matchup on paper that stands out as a gigantic separator that you think like, oh, I don't think that Team A can stop this for Team B, and thus I think Team A is going to win?
No, I don't think there's a gigantic separator. I think in this analogy, UConn is Team A. I think UConn's better. I think UConn is more balanced, more complete. I think they're a little bit better defensively, maybe slightly better offensively. I think the biggest thing that stands out to me, there's all this talk, especially with the way Klingen's played for UConn here of late, of like, the Donovan Clingan, Zach Edey matchup. And that should be great. UConn doesn't need Donovan Clingan to be great to win. Purdue needs Zach Edey to be great to win. Zach Edey's kind of the thing that makes their offense go. I mean, all those guys, Smith, Lawyer, Gillis, they've all turned into knockdown shooters, but like having Edey as a center of gravity is what makes it work. So if he has a slightly off night, whether that's because of Clingan or foul trouble or whatever, that spells trouble to me for Purdue. Whereas if Clingan doesn't look like this, lottery pick that he's looked like the past, couple weeks during the tournament, that's all right. UConn has, 4 or 5 other guys that can be really good and take over a game. And so that to me, I think is what kind of gives UConn a little bit of an edge, is that they have a bunch of great players. Purdue does too, but like Edey's kind of the main one. And so it feels like that gives a little bit more room for error, I guess, to pull out the win.
Yeah, the depth obviously is a huge factor here. When teams have been able to slow or stop to the extent that anyone has, Zach Edey, especially this year, but over the past couple of years, what are the strategies that tend to have the best success against him? And do you feel like with all the depth and options that UConn has, that those are at Connecticut's disposal?
Yeah, I mean, not many teams have a Donovan Clingan that can, kind of go up against him, and just in terms of skill and height and athleticism. So that's a little bit of an advantage that UConn would have that most other teams don't. I mean, honestly, this year there really haven't been many teams that have slowed down Edey even a little bit. I think the times when he's struggled has either just been he's had a bad whistle and gotten in foul trouble, or just been a little bit off. I don't know how much, I was at the game last year when Purdue lost to Fairleigh Dickinson in the first round. And that's a team that had no business beating Purdue, had no business being able to kind of slow down Edey. And he had a good game, but swarmed him constantly, pretty much made the other guys beat them. And I think that's why Purdue has gotten so, as good as they were last year, they're so much better this year because they've moved Edey around a little bit. He's more versatile in terms of, he can pull away from the basket a little bit. They've kind of changed some ways they run the offense through him. It's not just specifically throw it into the post, because he can do that and he's going to get a bunch of points out. defensively too. But then also those guys are mentioned, Lawyer, Smith, Lance Jones. They just became better shooters. They're more reliable, and so I give Purdue a lot of credit for realizing we're really good. We have this kind of incredible strength that no one else has in Zach Edey. We can get even better. And so to me that. I don't know that you can go into this game if you're UConn, just, cling and do your best and try and slow them down a little bit. Maybe if you want to, dive in or pinch down or double in certain situations, that's fine. But to me, I think UConn's advantage is having a guy that most other teams don't, in terms of maybe just being able to slow down Edey a little bit, but they don't even really need to worry about slowing him down, I don't think. I mean, other teams do this, let Edey get his points and we'll try and win, and it hasn't worked out. He's gotten 40 points or whatever. UConn is a team who Edey can get 40 points, he can get 20 rebounds, and UConn can still beat them because they're good enough defensively otherwise, and they're obviously good enough offensively to kind of counter that. So I don't know. Obviously, he's the focus of every game plan against Purdue, but maybe I'm wrong. I don't see like UConn going into this game thinking we have to figure out a way to slow him down. I think they can kind of figure out a way to beat them, even if he does have a great game.
Justin Williams from The Athletic is with us here on the Hoffman Show. Like you mentioned, though, like Klingon is super unique in terms of folks that Edey will have ever faced in his life. Like he's never looked eye to eye with anyone. He's 7'4", and Klingon's 7'2", and that's at least he's looking at like eyebrow to eye. Like that's a lot better than the top of someone's head that he's typically looking at. So I would also ask on the other side, though, how that goes for Klingon, right? He's been a centerpiece of UConn's offense for much of the season. Obviously, their leading scorer in their last game. Like, what do you or round or during the Elite Eight round? Like, what do you see in terms of UConn's offense having to potentially shape shift because Klingon isn't just going to be towering over the opposing center like he is used to on that side of it?
Yeah, just in general, I'm really interested to watch this matchup because I think it could tell us a lot about, pro potential evenly. If he goes out there, is clearly the better player and his way against Klingon, I think that's, you might see him. Same way for Klingon. If he goes out and holds his own and he defends well and has a good game, you're going to see kind of shoot up in terms of projections. But it's like we talked about earlier. Klingon doesn't have to have a good game, in my opinion, for UConn to win because they're so balanced and have players like Tristan Newton. I realize he's an All-American, so it sounds stupid. I don't think he gets enough credit still of like how much he can control an offensive impact of that team. 12 points, but because he knows how to get guys in the right spots. Stephen Castle, I think we might have talked about him last time I was on. He's a lottery pick who's like their fourth or fifth option, and then we saw in the Final Four game, it kind of felt like Alabama was like, all right, we're gonna let Stephen Castle beat us. Kind of did. Like he started off really hot, hit a couple shots, had a couple dunks on these cuts in. So, these are all just, Caravan can take over, Cam Spencer can hit a bunch of threes. So for me, I would tell Klingon, like, use all your energy and focus defensively to try and slow down Edey as best you can. Try not to get in foul trouble. And then offensively, if we can hit you for some lobs, we can, put Edey in matchups. Great. If not, we can take care of that without you. And that, to me, I think is what's going to be the biggest differentiator if UConn is able to win, which if I would expect.
Yeah, it's so funny watching more NBA basketball and understanding like what happens in the playoffs to certain types of players. And like, this has kind of been the Rudy Gobert thing forever. It's like, yeah, he's during the regular season, and then we're just going to spam the hell out of pick and rolls with him involved, pull him away from the basket. He's all of a sudden a liability, and you can't play him in the playoffs in a lot of series in his career. Obviously, it's different in college because they can just can be like, all right, fine, we're going to play zone and going to be patrolling the paint. But it wonder strategically how is it because he has these options and it could be one game situation. And there's not really a question here, just kind of spitballing ideas, Justin. But like there, if you get it right off the jump, UConn they have where they've averaged, I think, a 14.5 point margin of victory over the course of this thing. You try the wrong thing and take too long to adjust, and all of a sudden you got yourself a game, and Purdue, on a one-game scenario, could wind up doing the same thing Virginia did a bunch of years ago and avenging a loss to a 16 seed with the national championship.
Yeah, I mean, to me, the blueprint for Purdue would be maybe get Klingon in a little bit of foul trouble early so he can't be kind of that counterpoint to Edey, especially defensively. those other guys we talked about just, continue to knock down threes. And then you got to get a little bit fortunate with UConn. They're such a good team offensively. They run such good stuff. They get so many good looks for all those guys. Maybe they miss a few, maybe they start out cold and it's just a bad night for them. And I think if Purdue can do that, if they can maybe jump out on them a little bit, if they can get a little bit of the advantage, then you play Purdue ball the way they have all year. Edey's the center of gravity. He's going to find those guys if they or doing different things to him. And if not, he's going to do those, hook shots where it's like 80%. It feels like when he's catching the ball in the paint. And again, even saying that, that's really tough because the game, it felt like they were hanging with UConn, and then UConn rips off a 30-0 run. And it's like, all right, okay, well, it looked like it was going to be a game for 21 minutes or whatever, and now it's not when you're playing UConn. But I do think I don't want to make it sound like Purdue doesn't have a chance. I think they do. But I think if Purdue ends up winning, you're going to say, Edey played great. These guys knocked down shots. And then they had a couple actual bounces kind of go their way in terms of UConn foul trouble or guys just being off that night. That to me seems like the most likely scenario of a Purdue win. But it's not not a ridiculous scenario by any means.
This is March. Nothing is ridiculous, except for now it's April. And I guess it's a little less ridiculous when it happens. Justin Williams from The Athletic with us for a few more minutes here on the Hoffman Show. So we do, I'm with you. I had to pick, which, I mean, sure, we'll take picks. UConn, they're going to win tonight. They're back-to-back national champions. And Dan Hurley has already talked about, like, hey, like we're kind of rolling here. We could go back-to-back, yet it doesn't feel like we have the attention that if a Duke, a UNC, a Kansas did this, that they would be getting there. Do you agree with that? And why do you think that is, if you agree?
I do agree with that. I don't totally know what the reason is because it's also not nowhere. This will be, if they were to win tonight, it'd be what, the fifth title in 30 years or, or something like that. They've obviously done really well. They've now done it under multiple coaches. I think maybe if you're just pointing to kind of like the broad national attention, they don't want one go-to superstar like a Zachy Clark, or whatever. Again, as great as Tristan Newton is, he wins All-American. I don't think many die-hard college basketball fans are picking Tristan Newton out of a lineup. And they have, they don't have to rely on one guy. So I think that's what makes them great, but it also maybe hurts narrative perspective. I do wonder or think maybe, if they win tonight, certainly, maybe even if they don't, it feels like Danny Hurley has a chance to kind of become like this new face of college basketball. Coach K is gone. Roy Williams is gone. Jay Wright's gone. Some of the guys are still hanging around, Tom Izzo and stuff like that. But it feels like Danny Hurley, the personality and kind of the force of nature to be that next, like the next Coach K, where people love him or they hate him, but he's like, kind of the college basketball coach in the country. And I definitely think if he wins tonight and kind of some of the fallout that comes from that, I think we might see Danny Hurley reach another echelon of fame or notoriety or within the game, which honestly I think would be a good thing for college basketball.
Yeah, I don't disagree. I think what's really fascinating about that is we did a segment after K retired about like who's next, like because Jay Wright was retiring at the same time, Roy had retired, like all the names that you mentioned. And I remember going, you want to know who I think it is Dawn. I think it's actually going to be on the women's side because she just has this force of personality and she's the biggest star in that rapidly rising side of the game. And it's funny to me, like the reason it's an interesting comparison between Dawn and Hurley is I feel like these two teams are very similar. Like there's almost a taking for granted of how good they are, where you have a superstar. Clark obviously is a totally different category than Zach Edey, all due respect to Edey. But like you have kind of that central focus point where it's just like, no, this coach who's awesome is probably the star, has built a phenomenal team with a bunch of players that might wind up even in the pros. Like Castle, I think, is going to be a solid pro amongst others on that UConn team. Obviously, South Carolina is very young and is going to bring back almost everybody but Camila Cardozo on that side of it. But I do kind of wonder if the next generation is headlined by Dawn Staley and Dan Hurley, and Hurley winning tonight kind of cements his place in that. And I guess kind of also lead into is there any chance this is his last game for UConn? Because by the way, Calipari, who's still holding on from the quote unquote last generation, just left for Arkansas and the biggest job of the country and is suddenly available.
I would be blown away. As shocked as I was when that story broke last night of Calipari going to Arkansas, I cannot see a scenario in which Hurley leaves UConn the way there. And also just, as much as Kentucky's a basketball school, like UConn is a basketball school. Their football team doesn't even have a conference, obviously. So, they're even more heavily invested on that side. So yeah, I'm totally with you in terms of like his personality. He's not afraid to kind of be outspoken, combative, controversial, I think in kind of good ways. Would make him a natural for that role in college basketball. I also, I can't, win or lose, I can't see a scenario in which he leaves Storrs to go to Kentucky or anywhere. But all the things you said, I think him and Dawn Staley's a good one too, of these could kind of be the coaches, and we've had it, Gino and women's basketball, Pat Summitt, it's, we've had that before, but I think it does feel like a little bit of a changing of the guard for both of those sports.
Yeah, for sure. And because the nature of the sports, where even the longest tenured players are 4 years and out, like the coaches are the stars, and they definitely have a ton of star power. So that leads us to the last thing I want to just touch on real quick. What the hell happened at Kentucky that Calipari is leaving for Arkansas? Like he didn't go replace K at Duke. He didn't go to another blue blood. He's going to Arkansas. What happened?
Yeah, it's funny. I think we do this a lot in sports media. Like we can kind of piece together and rationalize why this happened. Yeah, there was just all this talk about whether Kentucky was going to fire him 2 weeks ago and pay a $30 million buyout. We kind of got through that. And then you can make the point of like, oh, the Tyson family and he's friends with them and they're going to put a bunch of money into Arkansas's NIL, still in the SEC. You can like come away pretty quickly with, all right, I can totally put the pieces together why this makes sense. Step back a little bit. When this first broke, I think his name was Wes Moore, like the local Arkansas TV reporter who kind of floated this out there. People were dunking on him on Twitter and like talking about how stupid this was. This is a huge seismic move that no one, would have predicted before that or seen coming. Even when you kind of throw out your list of like, who's a candidate for this job? Here's a pie in the sky one that's not going to happen. I didn't even see Cal for Arkansas. So to me, it's a huge shift. Even if you can, then like we pieces of why this makes sense. In the end, it works out for both sides. It was clear the Kentucky Calipari relationship, whether it's with the administration or the fan base, it was kind of straining a little bit. They were just considering firing him for $33 million from the Kentucky side. You don't have to do that. You can kind of start fresh and get the coach you want ideally and move forward. And Calipari gets to go to Arkansas and get a bunch of NIL money. And from his perspective, he's probably thinking like, look, I'm going to go to Arkansas in the same conference and I'm going to beat Kentucky and I'm going to prove to all these fans, why they were wrong about me and kind of shove it in their face. And on the Kentucky side, they get to say, we're going to go get Nate Oates or Scott Drew or, bring Rick Pitino back, whatever it ends up being. And we're going to show John Calipari how, kind of much he fumbled the bag here at Kentucky. I don't know which one of those is going to, end up being right, but I'm fascinated as a fan and a media member of college basketball to see it unfold.
If you want to just spark instant rage inside my brain, just say the name Rick Pitino and remind me that he's still employed. It just, the stuff that dude has done is unbelievable. He's such a good basketball coach, obviously, which is why he's employed. But the stuff that dude has done is just unbelievable that he still has a college job. Anyway, Justin Williams writing about all of this, not the Rick Pitino part. That's just me being angry. Writing about all the important stuff at The Athletic. Justin, you and your team do such great work. Really appreciate some time multiple times throughout the tournament. And perhaps we'll revisit closer to the NBA draft or as any of these other major pieces fall as well.
Absolutely. Appreciate you guys having me anytime.
This is the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and the Odyssey app.
It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980 as well. Hope that you're having a great start to your week, a great Monday. Of course, tonight, just about an hour from right now, we will have coverage of the men's NCAA basketball championship here on the Team 980. Coverage via Westwood One, where you will have the UConn Huskies taking on the Purdue Boilermakers for a national title. A win, of course, for UConn would be their second straight. Talking a little football now, though, and Ant, I obviously read the comments to our YouTube page at Craig Hoffman and, of course, at the Team 980 as well. I would say more frequently than I'd like to admit. I read them quite often. We joke about never read the comments, and we do the segment now on Thursdays. And sometimes something comes up often enough where I'm like, you know what? I don't want to wait until never read the comments. I'd actually like to respond to it because I think it's an interesting discussion point. And I think this year more than any other that I've been doing this football talking, I've learned more about the scouting process. And probably because more than any other year, this feels like a critical draft. Like, obviously, Washington had the second pick in 2020 where they wound up taking Chase Young, but because Young was so much a foregone conclusion and because at the time, like, they had already taken quarterback, and because I also, if I'm just being blunt, like, there's only so much that I trusted their front office to even listen to their scouts anyway because of what happened the year prior, where the owner walked in and told them to take a quarterback that none of the scouts actually wanted to take at 15 in Dwayne Haskins, then you're almost immune as a reporter because you were covering nonsense, and that was actually the story when it came to the team versus the actual scouting process itself. This year, we're dealing with a competent organization that's doing smart stuff and picking at the position that is dissected more than any other. And so I've learned, as much as I knew, I've learned even more, and also, being with Logan in the trenches, if you will, as he goes through all his scouting process and getting the notes that he sends me and hey, watch this. What do you think of that? Watch for this. Do you see it? Like, I've learned a lot. And I think being open-minded and continuing to be a lifelong learner is really important. But what it has led me to occasionally do is get sideways with fans because my opinion or the things I'm looking at don't match up with the average person. And what I want to do now is just be super transparent with something that I think I've learned throughout this process and that applies specifically to Jaden Daniels. The Commanders obviously have the number 2 pick. Daniels is currently the betting favorite. And I'm going to say this at the front end, and I'm going to continue to say this for the next couple of weeks because I somehow have been pigeonholed by the internet, which is always where you should go for self-respect and validation. I've been pigeonholed as someone who doesn't like Jaden Daniels and that I'm a quote-unquote Drake May guy. Anthony, as someone who listens to my voice more than any other human should, would you say that is a fair characterization of my current stance, or really my stance at any point during this process, that I don't like Jaden Daniels and that I am a Drake May guy?
I've never truly got that sentiment.
That's good because that's never how I've felt. So much to the fact that was the response to Friday's segment where we played some clips from Kurt Warner that I literally went back and re-listened to the entire segment because I was like, I know that's not how I feel, but is that what I said? It's not what I took out of it, but a lot of people did. And the reason is I made a point that with May and Caleb Williams, but specifically with Drake May, because Caleb Williams is going to go to Chicago, that some of the mechanical flaws in his game you can explain with a lack of comfort because May was constantly playing with inferior talent, where Daniels, who does not have some of those same mechanical flaws, often looked very comfortable in the pocket because he had an NFL caliber offensive line and 2 first-round receivers that had monster seasons. And somehow that got turned into something that it's not. So after that very long wind-up, here's the point I would like to make. And this is a really important thing, I think, in the scouting process, and a thing that I've learned to be on the lookout for, and listen to people who watch the college game and consume the college game more than I do, to make sure I have this data point as I watch a prospect. Who a player played with doesn't really, like, it does matter, but it is the relative talent that I think is more important. Relative talent means, it's just, that's my term. That's not any specific scouting term, although I'm sure someone else has probably stumbled into it. Relative talent means that, are you playing with players who are better than the players you're playing against, or are you playing with players who are worse than you are playing against? Not, is Drake May playing against better defenses in the ACC than Jaden Daniels in the SEC, to which the answer is definitively no. Jaden Daniels saw significantly better defenses than he did, or than Drake May did. Duh. Go look at the draft boards. Go look at how many ACC defenders are up there in the first round versus how many SEC. It's very obvious that Drake May saw worse defenses than Jaden Daniels did. But Jaden Daniels basically played SEC defenses with an NFL offense. He's an NFL quarterback. He has 2 NFL first-round receivers. He's got a left tackle that's going to be a top 10 pick next year. So that's 4 first-rounders. And then the rest of the line, which might all ultimately get drafted. Like, he's got an NFL caliber offense against SEC defenses. And yes, when they face Alabama, that is an NFL defense. There's NFL players all over the field, and schematically, it is the most advanced defense outside of Michigan, which it's kind of 1A, 1B in the entirety of college football. But every other week, and by the way, Jaden Daniels was awesome against Alabama. He was incredibly productive. He does some absolutely insane things, the kind of game that makes you go, we got to draft that dude number 2, and we're never looking back. Like, Jaden Daniels, this isn't meant to take away from Jaden Daniels. It is merely a data point. What you do with that data point is up to you. But the data point is not Jaden Daniels played against worse defenses than Drake May. The data point is Jaden Daniels always had the better players on his team, where Drake May and his really not very good offensive line and really not very good receivers went against, like, okay defenses in the ACC that often had players and in totality were better than his unit. That was not the case in 2022 when he had more NFL talent and just better talent in general on the roster, and some of the flaws that popped up in May's game in 23 weren't present in 22 because he was more comfortable. Again, what do you do with that information? I don't know. That's the hard part about this. That's not meant to draw conclusions. And to be clear, again, as explicitly as I can, if they take Jaden Daniels at 2, I'm cool with it. If they take Drake May at 2, I'm cool with it. They take J.J. McCarthy at 2, I'm cool with it. I think those are 3 players who are all on the same level, who have varying strengths and weaknesses, and depending on what you think of those strengths and those weaknesses and the interview process, which none of us are privy to, you take the guy that you like the most. But I think what happened was everyone heard me say, well, Jaden has better talent with him. And it's like, well, he also faced better talent, but the proportions are not the same. The ratios of the talent that Jaden had with him and was playing against are very different. Now, it should be pointed out, you could say basically the same exact thing about Joe Burrow. And Joe Burrow has worked out just fine in the NFL. And maybe that's it. I think a big difference between Joe Burrow and Jaden Daniels is that Joe Burrow basically had 1 season of college football. And that college football season was one of the best we've ever seen. Jaden has started, 56 games, I think it is? And none of his seasons look remotely close to what his senior year was. He had never thrown for 3,000 yards. He had never thrown for 20 touchdowns. He threw for 3,840. So did he all of a sudden figure it out? And you say, well, okay, well, that talent that he had with him, it was there in 2022. Yeah. Why did Brian Thomas Jr. have 361 yards receiving as a sophomore and 1,171 as a senior? Like, what happened there? Did Brian Thomas Jr. get better? Did Jaden Daniels get better? Like, that's what these scouts are trying to figure out. Did their offense change schematically? Did they change how they coached it? Like, this is the problem when people are dogmatic about their quarterbacks in a draft class. If your whole identity for months has been, I'm a Jaden Daniels guy, you got blinders on that probably prevent you from seeing the potential downfalls in Jaden's game and the potential upside in others. By the same token, if you are a Drake May guy or a Caleb Williams guy or a J.J. McCarthy guy, the same things apply. And I think that's kind of what drives me nuts at this point in the process. With 2 weeks to go, 2.5 weeks to go until we're in Detroit for round one. Again, we are taking the show to Detroit for round one. We'll be there on April 25th. I think what I've realized, Ant, by the end of this process is I thought I would get to a point where I had one guy and I was like, that's my guy. I don't know how much more declarative I can be than what I'm about to say. I am not going to finish this process with strong feelings. I am not going, on April 25th, I will say I think they should take player X because that's what we do. And ultimately, I'm then out of time to change my mind. And so we'll go off the air at 7 o'clock and I will say, I think they should take Jaden Daniels or Drake May or J.J. McCarthy. And then an hour and a half later, they will. They'll take someone. And if it's not the guy that if I say they should take Jaden Daniels and then they take Drake May, the next day, you know what I'm going to do? I'm going to come on the air and be like, that was a good pick. And I don't understand. Like, I've spent a lot of time watching these guys. I've spent a lot of time talking to a lot of smart people. I've thought deeply about what works at quarterback in the NFL. And I cannot fathom, based off of that summation of facts, having a strong opinion that your entire personality is that you are a insert any of those quarterbacks here guy. It does not make sense to me.
I mean, I think that's going to be pretty much everybody, like including me. Like, I don't have a clear-cut, favorite guy in the
you
fight.
Should spend more time in the comments. I've had people tell me that I should do terrible things to myself because I will not say that Jaden Daniels is the pick. And then the next three comments are like, if you're not on Drake, you're an idiot.
I mean, these guys aren't Caleb. I think he's the only, clear-cut, unanimous guy to go one. For two, everybody else has a lot of negatives or, cons to their games that need some addressing. So there's necessarily no clear cut. Granted, people might, like the fact that Jaden does scramble a little bit more.
Well, that's the funny thing too, is like, and we talk about this more next. Like, yeah. I actually don't think we haven't done this in a while. Tell you what, I'm gonna try to do something definitive next because I couldn't be more wishy-washy on who I like. I will actually lay out the facts of who these quarterbacks are next because it's hilarious to me how twisted some people get it. So we will do that next on the Hoffman Show on the Team 980 and always live on the free Odyssey app. It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980. All right, we got like 5.5 minutes here to try to give a purely factual, non-opinionated scouting report on how many of these guys do we want to do, Anthony? Do we want to do top 4? Do we want to do the top 6? How many guys do we want to hit?
Let's do 4.
Okay.
Is this including Caleb?
That would be including Caleb, yes. I mean, we can. It's going to be quick.
All right.
So let's go. Let's do it. We got scouting music and everything. This is scouting music now. Happy draft season. Continuing coverage. So, Caleb Williams. He's going to go number 1 overall because he should go number 1 overall. 6'1", good thickness in terms of the body type. Should be able to withstand everything you need to from both a durability and a can you stand strong in the pocket if people are around you standpoint. Is the best creator in this draft and would be the best creator in any draft that Patrick Mahomes is not in. Can throw from any arm angle. The pros of that is, well, he can do that. The cons of that is he has a bit of a tendency to do that too often. Now, that is over-accentuated in his final year at the University of Southern California because he had a god-awful offensive line that lost instantaneously all of the time, and so he had to run around a lot and still was incredibly productive. In 2022, when the line was a little bit better, had a little bit better receiving talent, he did show an ability to stand in the pocket and deliver, just be a surgeon back there, so he has shown it. Even then, occasionally would look for the home run more than the just taking the single or double that was there. So that is something that will continue to be coached up probably at the pro level. But there's a reason that the hype is around him. That is the scouting report on Caleb Williams. And any questions on Caleb Williams?
Nah, I love it.
Okay. He's going 1 to Chicago. Got it. Yeah. Okay. Which of the next 3 that we want to hit next? McCarthy, May, Daniels.
Let's go May.
All right, Drake May, prototypical size, 6'4", 230. He's just a tank in the pocket. He has a howitzer of an arm, can throw the ball all over the place. You want to see some of the best throws of your life, go watch the last 10 minutes of his pro day. Now, that is offset a tiny bit by a little bit of an elongated and slower release. The mental side of the game is very interesting. The offense he ran at North Carolina is critically panned, a.k.a. it was donkey doo-doo. Just a lot of reads that don't translate to the NFL level. A lot of stuff he was asked to do that doesn't make a lot of sense by most people that look up, the scheme. Occasionally, he was left without answers, and so he was left to create and also didn't have the greatest trust in his offense, as you could see by some very flawed footwork. His footwork is very inconsistent. When it's right, fires lasers, but he has some really, really bad misses on occasion. Another positive for him, he did handle quite a bit of the protection stuff. Negative, those protections didn't always hold up. So sometimes you're like, I don't know, was that actually the right call? So you got a mixed bag there. Biggest concern to underscore it is the footwork. Can he ever get the mechanical issues ever straightened out? The upside is, from a raw material standpoint, you're not going to get a whole lot better. He's also an elite scrambler. Not necessarily an elite runner, which we'll talk about with Jaden Daniels, but he's a guy that can move, make plays with his arm. He runs to throw, but when he does run, he has more first downs on scrambles, especially I think in third down situations. I think both stats are true if I'm remembering correctly, than anyone in the country not named Jaden Daniels. He is an elite scrambler, and that play has so much value in the modern NFL, which is why a lot of evaluators are extremely high on May, despite the technical work to be done. There's your Drake May scouting report.
Okay, no questions on Drake. I want to hear Daniels, and then I think I'll have a couple of questions about those two.
Okay, Jaden Daniels. Unbelievable senior year. One of the best college football seasons we've ever seen. 3,800 yards, 40 touchdowns, 4 picks. Do you know how hard it is to throw 40 touchdowns and 4 picks? The accuracy is tremendous. He's the best deep ball thrower in the class. Now, he does not have quite the arm strength as the other guys that we're talking about here, any of the other top 4. He has a very good arm, more than adequate, and he does use that arm tremendously well when it comes to the deep ball. So that might seem like conflicting information, but we're talking about velocity, zip, etc., versus the ability to loft a ball out and show kind of the touch that you need on those deeper throws. By contrast, to skip ahead for a second, McCarthy is the opposite. McCarthy has a really, really good arm. Like, his ball velocity and things are great. He did not show the same touch on the deep ball. So kind of a weird inverse of traits there. Also inverse of traits, comparing Daniels to May, Daniels is an elite runner, one of the best that college football has ever seen. He consistently was able to run away from, like, Florida and Alabama and SEC defenders who are supposed to be the best athletes in the country. Multiple long touchdown runs on the season. However, he's not a good scrambler, if you will. He's not a guy that ever is going to, in college, he did not ever really run to throw. He ran to run. Now, the upside of that is he's very good at running. So, again, what you do with that information is up to the evaluator, but that is a huge difference between Daniels and May. May, elite scrambler. Daniels, elite runner. Daniels also not very elite over the middle of the field. Doesn't look that way a lot. There's lacking, considering his production, NFL throws on tape. But some of the big play stuff that you're looking at, maybe in a Cliff Kingsbury-style offense, is there. The slot fades, the fade balls, the go balls, that stuff down the field. Very comfortable throwing outside the numbers. As experienced as anyone, not just in this class, but ever in college football, as he basically played 5 years, 3 at Arizona State and 2 at LSU because he took all the COVID years, et cetera, et cetera. That is the Jaden Daniels scouting report.
Wow. Just off those two, May, Daniels, which of the I know both of them have a lot of cons to their game, but which one do you think is easier to coach? Because I think that's where a lot of NFL teams need to do more of, like actually coaching, fixing things in quarterbacks' struggles and things.
It's a great question. I don't know the answer. I'm just going to be honest. I don't know the answer. Because I think in order to understand that answer, you have to talk to the kid. You have to talk to his coaches. You have to have more information that me sitting in a studio, by the way, as someone who's watched a ton of throws of these guys, who's watched complete games, who's watched all 22, who's watched TV copy, who's listened to interviews, all this stuff. I've never gotten a chance to get them on a whiteboard. I've never gotten a chance to talk to their quarterbacks coaches in a private conversation where I might have had a relationship with that coach for years and go, hey, what's he like? Because I think you could look at a kid like Jaden and go, he clearly can be coached and learned because look at the growth he made. You could also go, what took him 5 years to ever crack 20 touchdowns? So, like, that's the problem. With Drake, you're like, can this kid learn? I don't know. He was trusted with a lot of stuff, but also he regressed from 22 to 23. I don't know. Yeah. I tell you, J.J. McCarthy can be coached because he played for Harbaugh and they won a national title and he did everything that he was asked to do. The quick scouting report on McCarthy is he's got a really good arm. He's got really good mobility. He's not been asked to do a lot at Michigan because obviously they were up in a ton of games. They're very talented. But the stuff he did do was very translatable to the NFL. There's no gigantic red flag outside of a lack of evidence that he can layer throws, which is important in throw with touch, but that's the kind of thing that you also get with a higher throw volume. So to me, like the easiest answer on the coachability, the thing that I feel best about is McCarthy, but McCarthy might lack an elite trait that could ever put him as a top 5 quarterback in the league. Then again, some of the underlying data when it comes to like his ball velocity and things like that, you go, actually, he might have an elite arm. He ran like a 4.5 something. Like he's got really good speed. He can scramble and he can run. Like McCarthy's kind of in the middle of both of those guys. And sometimes that's the best path to go. So that's the scouting reports. What you do with that, beauty's in the eye of the beholder. People want to call in. You can be the beholder. 301-230-0980. We're just with you till 6:30 tonight. National championship of men's college basketball coming at you in just about a half an hour here on the Team 980. the Hoffman Show. We are live on the Team 980, always live as well on the free Odyssey app, streaming live on YouTube at the Team 980, taking your phone calls, 301-230-0980. We are talking quarterbacks. It's kind of what we're doing between now and April 25th. Probably after that, how will that guy do? Many people will have thoughts. We're taking yours at 301-230-0980, though. I just tried to give if you're just tuning in, a scouting report of each of the top 4 guys. And we might get to some Nick's and Pennick's thoughts here as well. But the top 4 guys, because I do think we've lost the way a little bit on some of this, where people have actually gotten some of the information wrong. What you do with that information is up to you. And that's where we kind of started, is a lot of folks looked at what I said Friday about Jaden Daniels, that, hey, Drake May, you can explain a lot of his footwork issues and other things by the fact that he didn't have superior talent. And I even just was reading some more of the comments, and someone goes, I don't understand how you can ding Daniels. I'm not dinging Daniels. I'm just trying to say, hey, if you are concerned about this for Drake May, some evaluators will just dismiss it because it's easily explainable. And so that's what you're trying to do, is you're trying to figure out, okay, of the cons, what do we think is we can either fix with coaching or circumstances? And a lot of folks look at Drake May and say the inconsistency in the footwork comes down to a bad offensive line and bad receivers and a lack of trust, and it's hard to be solid in your technique when you don't have trust in what you're doing. That's a Drake May commentary. That's not a Jaden Daniels commentary. Yeah, Jaden was awesome. And you want to know what he did with that? He was awesome. Like, he had great players around him. He had awesome talent around him. And he was insane. 40 touchdowns to 4 picks. What are we even talking about? What we're talking about is not Jaden Daniels. We're talking about Drake May there. But some people are so quick to jump and defend their guy because somehow, this has become people's religion as we get towards this draft, that I'm just like, do you not realize that this, like how ridiculous this is, this whole thing that you're doing right now? But that's what I get for being too online sometimes. So that's actually honestly my fault. 301-230-0980. Let's go to the phones, and we'll do this for the rest of the show until we hit real things. Again, we're off at 6:30 tonight with the national championship game here on the Team 980 for the men's basketball. Let's start off with Nate in PG County. Nate, what's up, man? You're on the Hoffman Show.
What's up, guys? So, real quickly, I kind of agree mostly with your Caleb scouting report, but I do feel like the off the field stuff is a really big thing with him. You didn't really mention that. As far as
I didn't mention it because teams don't care.
And I feel like he lost a lot of big games. Yeah, you might not care. But
No. It's not what I said. I didn't say I don't care. I said teams don't care.
You don't think teams care about the off the field stuff? You don't think teams don't care about this kind of narrative that I feel like he's put out there from his family about like wanting to have like ownership and be like,
because most of it's nonsense. Like some of that stuff is like, the stuff that is real is not a problem. The stuff that's not real that people made up would be an issue, but it's not real. People made it up.
Okay, so some of that stuff. All right, so some of that stuff was made up.
Yes. Yes.
Okay, but I still do think that he seems already too focused on his brand, and we've seen that be an issue with some players, where it's like their time and attention isn't always on.
You have, football, but you also haven't. Patrick Mahomes has plenty of stuff going on off the field.
But after he already won a Super Bowl and an MVP, like no one knew who. I'm not gonna say no one knew, but Patrick Mahomes was not who he is now coming into the draft. So we can't like romanticize it in with the revisionist history.
Okay,
it's
fine.
Like,
I'll pick a different guy. LeBron James has done all right. He was concerned with his brand when he came into the league. Like, you can play or you can't. It's that simple.
Pick, like, okay. Anyways, I did want to say though, I wanted to get your thoughts on Penix, because that's the kind of a guy I feel he's following the radar. I really like his game, and I feel like he's also like a gamer, and I think he's accurate as heck. And so I want to get your thoughts on his scouting report.
So yeah,
and, I also like what you said about McCarthy too.
Yeah, no, I appreciate it, Nate. I'm gonna let you take it offline because we got a bunch of calls stacking up. I'll give you the Penix scouting report. I'll even get the scouting music back on Let's go. All right, Michael Penix. Here's the line on Penix. The first thing, and I hate that this is the first thing, but this is the reality, is Michael Penix has had 2 major knee injuries, and there are serious concerns about his medical. If Michael Penix did not have that, he is probably much closer to being in the mix for a top 15, top 10 pick. He's probably above Bo Nix on a lot of draft boards. The reality is he's older, which means, by the time his second contract comes around, he's almost 30 years old. He's 29 because he's 24 now, and he's got knee issues. That combination is definitely plummeting his stock in a way that if the concerns turn out to be with merit, would be a good reason. As a player, he's a tough one to figure out. The offense he ran was a very college-y offense. He ran it extremely well. He also had tremendous talent around him and often was playing with better players than he was playing against, which is kind of where this conversation started with Daniels, etc., is when you have a top 15, maybe even top 10 pick at left tackle, which he has in Fontenot. He's got Rome Odunze, who's got a top 10 pick at receiver. Like, your life is just a lot easier. He also has some data that's really interesting. Like, his sack-to-pressure ratio is really, really low, which is a stat that typically translates well. But the film doesn't exactly back up a guy that made a bunch of, amazing quick decisions. It showed an offense that allowed him to get the ball out very quickly, and he's got a tremendously quick release. That is a huge positive. He also layers throws very well, has a strong arm. He never runs. So when you look at a modern NFL quarterback and the ability to make plays off schedule and scramble, Michael Penix is not your guy. That said, in the Texas game, he took everything that anyone had ever said about him on the negative column and smashed it. So if he's the quarterback that he was in the Texas game, he should be the number 1 overall pick in this draft above Caleb Williams. He was unbelievable. It's one of the best college games any quarterback has ever had. Through deep balls, through balls over the middle. He ripped seam balls. He moved well in the pocket. He did all the things that he hadn't shown in regularity all year. And then in the Michigan game, he was awful. He had no idea where to go with the football against the best defense he had seen all year. And you almost forgive him for that because Michigan's defense is so different than anything you ever see in college football. It's his first time ever seeing that. I would love if they could have played again 2 weeks later to see how Penix could have done against Michigan. So he's not quite as accurate as I think some of his reputation is. His footwork is not quite as consistent as some other folks, or as some of the narrative around him is. But he's a very talented thrower who doesn't ever run and has some inconsistency in terms of moving around the pocket that he has shown flashes of, but not on a consistent basis. That's the Michael Penix scouting report. End of scouting music. Back to the phones, 301-230-0980. Let's go to Kelly. Kelly, thanks for calling here on the Hoffman Show.
Hoffman.
What's up?
Hey, I think you're on the money. I understand what you're trying to say, and I don't take you as a anti-Daniels guy because you're framing it that way. The way I would look at it is, what quarterback's going to give the defensive coordinators we have to face the most headache game planning for right now? And I think Daniels is far and above better than May in that category. Also, in terms of the competition they play together, you play who you play, right? And you play with who you play with.
Of course.
And so the fact that he faced SEC competition and each of the last 2 years he got better against that competition, I like what he faced. Only person second to that I would say is J.J. McCarthy. I mean, facing, that Big Ten competition, having to play Ohio State every year and play high bowl games. But in terms of the quarterback doing what he needs to do, protect the ball, score points, he did what he needed to do. So,
yeah,
that's my take on it. But I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, no, Kelly, I appreciate that call. Because, the thing is, if they take Daniels in 3 weeks, or 2.5 weeks, I'm not going to be mad about it. And I will totally understand it for all the reasons that Kelly said. Game planning against a guy who can escape the pocket and run for 80 yards is a disaster for a defensive coordinator. But it's a weird thing because he's not, Lamar is obviously the guy in recent memory who is like that in the league, and game planning against Lamar is terrible. You have to simplify your coverages. You have to account someone to make sure that he doesn't run. There's all of that. But the difference between Lamar and Jaden Daniels is Lamar will get outside the pocket and look to throw still. Jaden Daniels in college was a one and run kind of player with frequency. There are definitely examples on his tape of him getting through progressions. It's not like it's not there, etc. But the tendency for him was, I got Malik Neighbors and I got Brian Thomas Jr., and if I look towards that guy, whoever's my primary, and he's not open, I can take off and I can make a big play. And that's not going to work with the same consistency in the NFL. And so what you want is a guy that will stand back there and throw from the pocket, which Jaden Daniels will do. He also has plenty of examples on tape where he just sits back there and, he's got super clean pockets because the O-line was really good. And he sits back there and reads it out. And you're like, okay, this is cool. But what happens when you have muddy pockets? If the pocket gets muddy in college, he runs. If the pocket gets muddy in the NFL, can you move and shift around the pocket itself, where McCarthy actually is excellent at that, and make a play with your arm, or get out and scramble and make a play with your arm outside the pocket, where May is probably the best of the three, versus what Jaden will do, which is just take off and run, where he's by far and away the best of the three. So that is the conundrum, is this very common NFL thing that happens. Which solution do you want? And do you think you can coach up whichever guy you take into the other solutions being in the bag of possibilities? It's the Hoffman Show. We're on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app. Take a couple more calls to wrap this thing up, and then it's time for Real Things next on the Team 980. All right, wrapping up here on the Team 980. We're always live as well on the free Odyssey app, taking your calls at 301-230-0980 on the quarterbacks. We've done a nice little hour here of quarterback talk on the Team 980. Let's keep it rolling with Alfonso. Alfonso, thanks for calling. You're on the Hoffman Show. All right, Alfonso, we're going to put back on hold, see if he's paying attention. Let's go to Sean. Sean, thanks for holding. You are on the Hoffman Show.
Hey, how you doing, Craig?
I'm good, Sean.
I just wanted to make this one statement. I read somewhere that even the pros, the expert GMs, or NFL, 21% of the time they get this quarterback situation right. So it's a great chance that even the top four are probably not going to be whoever's going to be the good quarterback out of this class. It's probably not even going to be one of these top four. But I just don't understand the McCarthy. Daniels, May, whatever. I don't understand the McCarthy fever. And I think it's partially because of Harbaugh. If it wasn't for Harbaugh, I don't think McCarthy would be even mentioned in this number 2 pick because of his productivity as far as volume.
Well, yeah, because he didn't accumulate stats. But let me, Sean, let me ask you this question. What is it that you look for in a quarterback? Like if I'm asking you, I'm like, hey, Sean, you got to make the pick for the Commanders at 2. Will you tell me what traits you want? I'll tell you which guy you want. What are the traits that you want in an NFL quarterback?
Joe Burrow, quick processor, someone who came from college, who had mounds of tape.
Burrow only played 1 year in college. He sat behind Haskins at Ohio State and then went to LSU and had one incredible year.
He had mounds of production. He threw touchdowns. He had production. He saw it against the SEC. He was an option. He wasn't. They didn't win despite him. They won because of him.
Of course.
So,
but Michigan didn't win despite of J.J. McCarthy. They often won because McCarthy was able to make the key plays when they asked him to, even though there's a lot of games where he didn't have to do it.
Yeah, I understand that, but I just don't see how the lack of volume of those, because in the NFL you're going to be game planned around. It's not the same as playing in the Big Ten. And if a 21-year-old, if a GM picks a 21-year-old and hope that he progresses and all of a sudden now he's going to be asked to come along, you're going to get fired, I believe, because that position, the greatest of all time, is a 6th-round pick that New England backed into.
Sure.
This hype for McCarthy, I just do not understand it because.
Well, what I would tell you is that when he's got no major red flags, he's got all the tools you could want. And when you talk about processing speed, like he's got it. Like that's the thing. I just think a lot because he didn't show it a lot in college because he didn't have to. I think people are discounting it. And because when you sort by stats, he's never going to be at the top of any list. Like people dismiss it. But if you watch what he did do, not what he didn't do, you watch what he did do, I'm telling you he's right there. Like go ahead.
I'm sorry. But I'm just saying his averages of doing this. Okay, yeah, he probably could do it 5 times. But if you ask him to do it, if you increase his output on doing it, will he be as successful? Because
we don't know.
We're game planning for the run. And that's my point. What GM would risk that at number 2?
Well, there was.
It just baffles me.
The GM picking at number 2 was the assistant GM of the team that was in the Super Bowl last year, and their quarterback did a lot of the same stuff. Like I would tell you, in a lot of ways, J.J. McCarthy is a more physically talented version of Brock Purdy. And we can say, well, Brock Purdy went last, and it's like, well, yeah, he shouldn't have. And so it really comes down to this. This is my thing with McCarthy is do we want to fall in love with the traits and all that kind of stuff, or do we want to actually look at what works in the NFL? And to me, the stuff that works in the NFL, he's got.
I agree with that 100%. But I'm just saying, I would not at number 2 overall. I just, if I'm going for like the coach, they had the coach on, and they had they were talking about the players, the impact players at that position, and even Doc. And I know this is not Doc's show, but if you pick somebody at 2 overall, they should come in day 1 and be an impact player, even if you have to run first to do it.
I hear you, Sean, but I actually disagree with that. That's a philosophical difference, and this is like what makes it fun, right? Is like if you and I could be working in the same front office, and I could be the GM and you could be the assistant GM, or the other way around. We're 2 college scouts, and we could both have those opinions and work together, and that happens in scouting rooms all across the league. For me, I don't care what you do immediately if you're the quarterback of the future. I want to know which to me, this is the ultimate question I'm trying to answer. Which quarterback gives me the best chance to win a Super Bowl or multiple Super Bowls in the next 10 years? To me, at quarterback, that's what I'm talking about with the number 2 pick. And I don't care if that means you have to sit for 2 years. If I'm going to get 2 Super Bowls in the next 10 years, but 8 years of play, that's better to me than 10 years of play and 0 Super Bowls. And that involves a level of patience that hasn't been had around here in a long, long time.
But what about Trevor Lawrence and Herbert? These guys were coming out. They haven't even come around. And we're going to take the project.
There are no guarantees.
Yeah, I got it. So that's what I'm saying. At 2, you can't play with a project.
Okay, so who would you take then?
May
is an enormous project.
Listen to me though. May or Daniels. But because you have to take a quarterback at that, but somebody in that ilk or Penix. I'm not going to take somebody who does not have the volume and hope that he can. If I increase his output, he's going to continue to express those traits at a higher level on the NFL. The NFL is not college.
Sure, and Sean, we got to run because we're up against the clock. But I appreciate the call and I appreciate the back and forth. But this kind of illustrates the point of like McCarthy's 21 years old and doesn't have you can explain, and this is kind of where we started this whole thing. Is like, can you explain the hole in the resume? For May, you can. For Daniels, there's arguably no hole in the resume. The hole in the resume is his first 4 years. And you're like, I don't know, he just didn't figure it out yet. And then he figured some stuff out, and he was incredible as a senior. And the question you're asking with him is different. Is that who he is? Or is he 23 years old playing against a bunch of guys that are younger? And he had played enough college football that he figured it out. If it's going to take him 3 years to figure it out in the NFL, that ain't going to work for a dude who's already 20 or who's almost 24 years old. Whereas McCarthy, you just go, like, we can probably, slow drip him more and more volume over time, a la what the Patriots did with Brady, by the way. And they won 3 Super Bowls before Brady was even like a top 5 quarterback in the league. And he was able to learn on the job in a way that's smart. And that's where coaching comes in. But like May is an enormous project. Daniels, you don't know, like, can we fix his vision over the middle of the field? There are real durability and size questions with him. With McCarthy, it's kind of like, okay, we think he can do a lot of stuff right now. Can he get good enough to make it worth that number 2 pick? And then Penix, you have a ton of injury and other questions. These are the discussions that are happening in draft rooms across the league, though. These are the right questions. The answers, reasonable people, I think, can disagree on. All right, wrapping up. It's time for Real Things.
Real things.
We're not going to be sucked this year.
Real people.
5 and 11. Not very good.
Said into real microphones.
The culture is actually damn good.
All right, 2 real things. Do we have time for 2? No. You know what? Everyone heard Dawn Staley on Caitlin Clark yesterday on the podium. It was awesome. Dawn is such a class act, and Caitlin deserved that. So you heard what Dawn said. That's my take on it. Everyone is absolutely obliterating what Diana Taurasi said about Clark and the rest of the incoming rookie class to the WNBA with SVP last night.
Right? When the college guys come out, they're waiting for them. I mean, Camilla's coming, Caitlin's coming. There's more than just that are coming. What will the league have in store for them when they get there?
Look, SVP, reality is coming.
And that is where most of the Instagram memes stopped, which is dumb because that's not what DT said.
Okay. There's levels to this thing, and that's just life. We all went through it.
Of course.
And you see it on the NBA side, and you're going to see it on this side where, you look superhuman playing against 18-year-olds, but you're going to come with some grown women that have been playing professional basketball for a long time.
Yeah. What's controversial about that? Besides, if you cut the quote off a 10th of the way into it because you want Instagram or Twitter or whatever TikTok clicks. We're the worst. We, the media, sometimes. I'm not doing that. See, I played the whole thing. It's not me. It's them. The dirty, dirty media. That's our show. The Men's National Championship is next.